An interconference battle, or inter-NFC battle, AFC, NFC. Derek Carr, the Raiders from the AFC West, taking on the boys from the Big Easy there, the NFC South, in Louisiana. And if you didn't see this game, it was not one of the high-profile matchups of the weekend. You might have missed it. Andy Dalton tossing a pair of touchdowns, but more impressively, not throwing an interception, although he tried. And New Orleans defense stonewalling the Las Vegas offense for a 24-0 shutout. 24-0 shutout victory for the fellas from New Orleans. So the Saints improved to 3-5 on the season. The Raiders dropping to 2-5. The better story in the losing locker room, Coach Josh McDaniels is under siege at this point, and he issued a mea culpa after the game. First-year Vegas coach expressing his remorse for the team's garbage performance. He said, "I apologize to Raider Nation," he said, and he wanted to own it. Many people who like the Raiders wish he would own it back to New England, and what a mess that is. We actually have the audio here, but here is Josh McDaniels. Does this make you feel any better that he's taking responsibility for being terrible at his job?
I apologize to Raider Nation for that performance, and again, I own that. That's my responsibility. So we have to do much better, obviously, in every phase of the game to be able to compete with a team like that who's well coached, has good players. There's no shortcut to improving, and it starts with me. I got to work hard. They got to work hard, and that's what we're going to do. I think we have a great group in the locker room. They're very resilient. They practice hard. They study. They prepare. Again, like I said, if you're going to point a finger, point it at me.
Yeah. Okay. So we are told that the owner of the team, Mark Davis, who was at the game, had a lengthy, closed-door post-game meeting with Josh McDaniels in the visiting locker room inside the bowels of the Superdome. Now, if you're a Raider PR person, you'll say, well, the owner and the coach meet all the time. But this felt a little different, right? This felt a little different considering the way the Raiders played. So let us discuss the question, what do you think Mark Davis, what do you think Mark Davis said to Josh McDaniels?
He gone.
Well, I don't think he said that. I've got P.F. Chang's, Rosetta Stone, and floaties. And we will combine all of these things together, and we are going to make some gumbo, which is, I think, what the Raiders choked on. They had some bad gumbo, and they choked on that. So, first of all, Mark Davis, I assume this is how it went. They got into the visitors' locker room there, the coach's room, and Mark Davis was telling Josh McDaniels that his father, if his old man was still around, that he would have pulled out the old-school overhead projector, Mr. Davis, the old man, and they would have had some film study. And Al would have said, hey, I used to be a coach, and I know how to coach better than you. But Al Davis is not walking through that door, and sadly, it would appear the commitment to excellence also died when the polyester tracksuit went away to the pearly gates there outside the Raider facility, and so now it's devotion to Dolesville for the Raiders, a tedious Raider team. This game and much of this season has been a boondoggle. A boondoggle. Instead of breaking down the X's and O's, Mark Davis does not strike me as an X's and O's guy. He doesn't seem like that kind of guy. Although he is willing to go to a fast food joint by himself, which I respect, even though he's got a lot of money. But Mark Davis, I assume that he went to his smartphone there, and he pulled out in the meeting there the P.F. Chang's menu. And the Raider owner and Josh McDaniels were breaking down what he should have for dinner at P.F. Chang's following the loss. And Mark Davis said, well, maybe I'd have the Mongolian beef, but I'm just trying to decide between that and the crispy honey chicken. Maybe I'll have that instead. And Davis wanted input from his head coach, and since Josh McDaniels advised him to have the Mongolian beef, Mark Davis called an audible, and he went with the Kung Pao chicken instead. So he didn't even go with the crispy honey chicken, and that's how that went. Now, secondly, is Josh McDaniels a good head coach? Is he a good head coach? Yeah, the arrow is pointing the direction of absolutely not. Now, we have no evidence that Josh McDaniels is capable of succeeding on his own. We do have a lot of evidence that when you give him a Hall of Fame quarterback and a Hall of Fame head coach, that he can get it done. We know he can do that. But on his own, he has been an abject failure. He did that in Denver. It was a disaster. And you look at what he's done here in Vegas, and it's like, wow, right? What are you doing here? I give McDaniels credit, though. He was able to wash away the stank from the Broncos and how bad that went there. He went back to his happy place with Bill Belichick, and he was able to hornswoggle another dumb NFL team to hire him, the Raiders, right? He enjoyed the afterglow of Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, and the Raiders, they were the suckers, right? And we heard how loaded Las Vegas was, and they got Devontae Adams, and they doubled down on Derek Carr, the quarterback. They give him some funny money and an extra contract, which makes it seem like it's more of a commitment. So the Raiders, if you look at the depth chart, they have a fully loaded AK-47, the Raider lineup. They've got pass rushers on defense. They've got a running back who was a first-round pick who's had some big games this year. They've got the quarterback who Josh McDaniels was praising. They got the Hall of Fame receiver. They got all this. All right? So loaded weapon. And they've been firing blanks most of the season. It's fascinating. Miserable failures. And it is a poorly coached team. Now, ultimately, the players are the ones that are out there on the field, but Josh McDaniels and his players, they praise how hard they work and all this. They need a Rosetta Stone because they're not speaking the same language, it would appear. And Pollyanna members of the Raider Nation fan base, they say it's not that bad, that calm down. And 4 previous losses were all by 1 score. It's not that big a deal. This is the first time the Raiders have been blown out in a game, and it's being blown out of proportion. Of course, this is all nonsense. Right? Most NFL games, as we have talked about, and I know this as a gambler, anytime I see 7+ points, I almost always take the points. Very rarely will I lay the points. I will take the points because it's by design. The business model of the NFL is for these games to all be 1-score games in the fourth quarter. And so that's how these games are played. There's not that big a gap between the very good team at the very top, which is Buffalo or Kansas City, and the team at the very bottom, and whoever you think that might be, there's not that big a difference, right? So that's the Raiders, though, have been radioactive bad at times, and really when the game's been on the line here. Some of these games, they blew a 20-0 lead to Alligator Arms Murray at home. How do you do that? They never had the lead against the Titans, blew a 17-0 lead to the Chiefs at Arrowhead. And so this season is a bridge. It is a bridge to nowhere for the Raiders. Now, turning the page. What do you make of the Saints? Are the Saints now a good team because they beat the Raiders 24-0? No! They are not a good team. But they have a decision to make. It's a difficult decision because you never want to flush a season away. But if you're New Orleans, you're in the right place. It's all like real estate. Location, 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 location. But to answer the question, are the Saints going to be buyers or sellers at tomorrow's trade deadline on Tuesday? The answer is none of the above. They're stuck in a quagmire. They don't have a first-round pick in 2023. They gave that to the Eagles, so it's not like they should trade away players and be sellers. Why would you do that? You're just going to give the Eagles a higher pick. There's no reason to give away the store. Adding players doesn't make much sense either because if you look at the big picture, don't fool yourself, this is not going to be a team that turns into a juggernaut with 1 or 2 upgrades to the roster. So the professional advice, unsolicited advice, for the Saints before they go marching into the trade deadline here, the advice is simple, right? They should put on the floaties and just float through the manure and just deal with it. Because the NFC, it's a smoldering dumpster fire, the entire conference. New Orleans is in a division with Flotsam and Jetsam. Atlanta is in first place, and they suck. Tampa Bay cannot deal with the fact their quarterback's getting a divorce, and he's 45 years old. The whole team's falling apart. The Panthers have an XFL refugee, P.J. Walker, who's actually looked okay the last couple of weeks, but is that sustainable? And so there is a path to salvation, to the postseason, but let's not get carried away. Dennis Allen, you think that guy's going to lead the way there for the Saints? I don't. Not the second coming of Sean Payton or even my friend Jim Mora, who used to work here. He can't do diddly-poo.
Playoffs?
Yeah. It's my thought. To Andy Dalton, the placeholder until Jameis Winston comes back, and let's not get crazy here. Don't get crazy. Now, speaking of crazy, the Raider offense And to say they were trash is the understatement. Like, what were they doing? Were they could have put Vegas showgirls out there. I think they would have gotten more yards, the Raider offense in this game. 13 first downs in the game, 183 yards for a professional football team against the Saints defense, which recently I believe was 28th in the NFL in the last month or so. Well, 31st OR, but 28th the last month. So they played a little bit better, but still.
Garbage.
183 yards. And Derek Carr. What college? Oh, he went to Fresno State. That's right. Fresno State is where he went. Anyway, here's Derek Carr, and these guys say the same thing after every loss. Does anyone buy into this dogma, this bull crap that these guys say, or are you like me at this point? You're like, don't tell me you're going to do it, just do it. I don't need to hear that you're going to do it. Anyway, here's Derek Carr, and he certainly, if there's one thing Carr's better at than Tom Brady, it's talking after a loss. He's had a lot of experience. Anyway, here's Derek Carr on the state of the Raiders.
You're not going to just roll the ball out there and just be better. You heightened sense of urgency, competitive, really make practice competitive, really try and dominate when we get out there and come in with the right mindset.
Yeah, I long for the days. Charles Barkley, before he became TV's Charles Barkley, when he played in the NBA, and I was in my younger days, and I was a radio stringer, which is a radio reporter, and I remember going up to Barkley a few times, and I'd ask him about, he was with the Sixers, he was with the Suns, but with the Sixers, one of the funniest nights, I asked Barkley about the Sixers, and they weren't very good. And he said, we suck. And it was awesome. It was the greatest thing. And it was so unexpected. Because you ask pretty much anyone else, he's like, hey, what do you think? And they'd be like, oh, no, we're fine. We're going to figure it out. Everything's all right. Anyway, here's more from Derek Carr. And he does point out his analysis of the Raiders' collective performance against the Saints.
That right there is embarrassing, and that should never happen, especially with the group of guys.
That's a drop.
Locker room. It sucks that we went through it. It happened. You give them credit. Great defense, great scheme. DA did a great job. Their players played hard. They did a great job. And so got to take a look at ourselves, though, and really check, see how we want to go into this next game.
Yeah. Unfortunately, all the mirrors are broken at the Raider facility, so they can't look at the mirror. And so the Raiders, 2 wins. They beat the Broncos in Week 4, and they beat the Texans, a game they were trailing in going into the fourth quarter in that game. And the Denver game back in Week 4, that also was a tie game, late second quarter, and then the Raiders took off after that.